Good morning. I just turned my phone off, so if you are inspired, you might want to do the same. I'm Peter Busek, president of Sill. You probably know that. I'd like to start this off a little differently. Between the time of the last Sill meeting and today, in that gap, a very dear friend of all of ours, Marlene Ross, she died. David Goodell gave a very nice tribute to her at the Residents' Council, but she had a special place in the running of Sill. So let me just tell you very briefly, when I arrived here, when Cindy and I arrived, the president was Aaron Sadoff, and Marlene provided a lot of support to him. After that, Elaine was president, and Marlene helped her a lot. When I started out this summer, Marlene helped me. Before all of this, she was president of Sill. So she was important across the community, a friend to so many people. But I suggest we just take a moment of silence, and then we'll continue. So it's nice to think back about Marlene. We all think about her a lot. I want to point out something else. It's hard to transition from thinking about her to real world issues, but I want to point out that you all should have received a copy of the catalog, the Sill catalog. Was in your mailboxes. It's also online. At the bottom, right here, is the address for the web in case you want to nominate speakers. I encourage you all to do that. It's open, nominations are open to everyone. So it's at the bottom of the top page of the catalog, or you can send an email to Cindy or me or anyone else who you like, and ask them for that. We'll help you make nominations. We don't have all that many slots, but still this is an opportunity for you. I'd like to announce a few other meetings. Woody's on the 10th is going to have the Black Market Trust Quintet. It's a pop vocal jazz group that pairs vocalists with the swinging high-energy sound of Paris Cafe Jazz. Carl Yoder gave me this on the way up. It's a history club meeting on Monday the 12th at 10:30 in the Oasis on causes or cases for Civil War revolution. So that's here. And then the next Sill is in 1 week, is Educating and Learning at MIM, and the speaker will be Mike Silvers. Today, the talk is on really a topical talk. It's just the perfect timing. It's The Dash for Critical Minerals is Reshaping Global Power by Mel Sanderson, and she will be introduced by Shoshana Tanser. Want this?
I need it. Okay. Welcome. I know that I've been looking forward to this lecture, and I'm sure that many of you have also. We'll learn a lot about a subject, rare earths, that we did not even know existed 10 years ago. And we have a speaker today who is very knowledgeable about rare earths and also is very knowledgeable about global diplomacy. She's one of the few people who has sat at a table with Putin, who is here in Phoenix. Melissa Sanderson, better known as Mel, has had an amazing career. Spending 2 decades in the U.S. Department of State, she rose rapidly in rank, moving from one post to another, Latin America and Canada and Europe, and wound up as second in command of our embassy in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where she was involved in negotiations involving their copper industry. Realizing that she didn't want to become an ambassador, which would have been the second or the last rank possible, she resigned and came to work for Freeport-McMoRan, the large mining company, where originally she was vice president of Africa and then became director of international affairs. At some point, when Freeport-McMoRan made a buyout officer to their top administrators, Mel took it. And she went off on her own and has been a consultant to companies, to industry, and to the State Department. She is a recognized leader in the mining industry and has given keynote speeches at international mining conferences, is requested information by the Wall Street Journal, by CNN, by all sorts of places, and is a professor of practice at the Thunderbird Graduate School. We're fortunate to have her with us today, and I'm fortunate, most fortunate, to be able to call her a close friend. Mel?
Okay, yep, I hear myself. It's always good if you can hear yourself speak, even if you can't always hear yourself think. So thank you, Shoshana. That was a comprehensive and very nice introduction. She's lived some of that history through our friendship over these many years. So how many people have seen in the press the last couple of days articles about Greenland? So after briefly talking about what are rare earths, I'm going to segue into what about Greenland and what about a couple of other countries that maybe are not as much forward of mind, like Saudi Arabia, Kazakhstan, a few other interesting places like that. So as Shoshana noted, a decade ago, rare earths was not a phrase that was falling from everyone's lips. It doesn't mean we weren't using them, because we were. They are in, for instance, conventional cars. My 2014 Subaru has rare earths in it. Why is that? Because rare earths are crucial components to permanent metal magnets. Permanent metal magnets are crucial to things that move. So when you push that button to raise and lower the window, say, "Thank you, rare earths." When your transmission actually turns your drive shaft, say, "Thank you, rare earths." But they weren't top of mind because they weren't a crisis material. China has then, and has still now, tons of rare earth in its own territory. China then, as now, holds rare earth concessions all around the world that they very foresightedly bought or otherwise acquired over the last quarter of a century. So automotive makers, the US defense industry, felt no sense of urgency because anything you needed, you could get from China. And the price was always good because China was happy to do business with US automakers and particularly the US defense industry. So then what has changed? Our world changed. I still remember when I got my first laptop computer to use at home. Oh, revolutionary. Now, I hardly touch the thing. I have a supercomputer in my pocket. These changes are what made critical materials critical. And it goes beyond just rare earths. It's a spectrum of minerals that in different ways, and sometimes interconnected ways, are part of that technology revolution. Lithium and nickel, for instance, are critical materials for batteries in electric vehicles and for the giant batteries in the wind towers and for the transforming batteries in the conduit electrical systems. So, very critical materials indeed. But they are not as pervasive as are rare earths. And there's a high degree of what is known as substitutability. So if, for instance, lithium becomes too expensive, there already are battery technologies that do not rely on lithium. We can have sodium batteries, we can have silica batteries. So worst comes to worst, we don't need lithium. Do without that one. Nickel is harder to get around. Nickel is pervasive in many different ways. It's used in all kinds of manners, even involving the structure of buildings. So nickel, critical material. But rare earths is where the game is being played out, the big geostrategic game. So in very technical terms and very briefly for 1 minute, rare earths are the 17 elements in the lower right-hand corner of that periodic table that we all had inflicted on us at school, plus 2 additional elements, scandium and yttrium. That's the bundle. And mostly, right now today, when we say rare earths, we essentially mean just 5 or 6 of those 17. So there's what I have taken to calling the core 4. 2 light rare earths and 2 heavy rare earths. That distinction, as you would logically expect, has nothing to do with the weight of the actual rock. It's just the atomic weight of the element. So the 2 lights are neodymium and praseodymium, NdPr, for those who love them and use them every day. Dysprosium and terbium are the 2 heavies. Why are those the core 4? The lights facilitate rapid transfer of energy, and therefore, in computing systems, for instance, of information. The 2 heavies keep the system cool enough so it doesn't blow up in your hand or in your face. That's why they are the core 4. A couple of others that are routinely looked at: gallium, germanium, gadolinium. Why those 3 in addition? They are particularly crucial for the US military or anyone's military that is building high technology weapons. I was telling Shoshona that when I get some time, I'm going to write an article for Investor News looking over the horizon, because one of the things that is crucial in the geostrategic struggle is artificial intelligence networks. Which nation or group of countries will build, if possible, the universal AI platform to facilitate the international flow of information and therefore well-being? There are 2 leading candidates at the moment. One is us. One, no surprise, China. A third dark horse coming up hard in the right-hand lane, Saudi Arabia. And those systems right now have a fatal flaw. As they are currently being built and currently looked at, they are intensive energy consumers, and they are intensive water consumers. Obviously, this poses the potential for problems, not just in the United States, but anywhere given the impacts of global climate change on water in particular. And to the extent that water fuels energy, same problem. New technology is looking into narrow network quantum computing, and that is going to require the core 4, but in addition, 4 other elements that no one is looking at right now. So the history of rare earths is the history of technology. And as technology continues evolving and changing, the need for rare earths is going to increase, not diminish. Current economic studies by the United Nations and other authorities show that demand for the existing basket of rare earths will exceed supply as soon as 2030. This is stimulating an intense race to acquire and secure resources. So those are 2 different things. You know, I can run out and buy land in North Carolina. If I don't put a fence around it, somebody could come and chop down all of my trees. You have to be able to secure what you have acquired. So let's come back to this geopolitical scenario now. Let's start with China. You know, the United States used to be in the rare earth business. It's a company in California that 25 years ago was called Molycorp. Their particular deposit of rare earths is coupled up with molybdenum, which in my personal opinion actually merits being on the critical list, but is not on every list as of yet. What does molybdenum do? Molybdenum makes reinforced steel. That's its key function, but it is also used in many chemical processes. So Molycorp was producing molybdenum and rare earths as a sideline. 25 years ago, the market crashed for molybdenum, and there wasn't enough demand for rare earth to support Molycorp. They went bankrupt, closed the mine. Which, by the way, in the mining industry, it is very extreme to close a mine. I mean, bringing a mine back online is like raising the dead. It's like Frankenstein. So they closed the mine. About 8 years later, Chinese investors stepped in. They bought the company renamed MP Materials from Mountain Pass Materials because that's where they're located, Mountain Pass, California. So China rejuvenated the rare earths business in America for a couple of reasons. They can sell that rare earth to automakers, to tech people, all kinds of prospects in America. And what was happening with MP Materials until as recently as 18 months ago, everything that they mined, they shipped to China to be processed, and not just processed to an oxide, transformed into metals and magnets. And then China sold those back to America at a terrific markup. Our rocks, their process. They make the money. When you look at the rare earth supply chain, we essentially gave it all away starting 25 years ago. Because essentially we gave up on MP Materials. We gave up on the idea of processing rare earths and transforming them into anything. We used to have one metal maker in this country. They went out of business. We used to have a magnet maker. It went out of business. Now we are chasing a supply chain, and we're starting from 25 years behind. China's market position is such that it can turn off the tap. And within a very short period of time, months, Western economies will begin to falter. Because there's always about 6 months in the transport chain. So if China decided to say, today, no more rare earths for you, America, as they have done in recent months, we have about 6 months to decide what we're going to do about that. This is why the urgency of negotiating with China. This is why President Trump reached an agreement with China for a 1-year moratorium on the freeze. The freeze is in place. If China decides that we're doing something that they don't like, they can break that moratorium. And effectively speaking, that gives us 6 months to live. That's the power of China right now. It is using that power not just against us, but against those who work with us. Japan makes magnets. South Korea makes magnets. Both of those countries make metal. There's a magnet company in the UK. The Chinese government has said to those countries, if we find out that you are selling magnets to the American defense industry, we will cut you off. They can do that legally. They are utilizing their export control regime to do this. And that's legal. The United States utilized our export control regime to bring down the Soviet Union in the Cold War. So the United States ensured that in international law, export control regimes are recognized ways to essentially circumvent the rules of free trade that otherwise would be enforced by the World Trade Organization. And China learned that lesson. In 2011, Japan was China's first victim. The Japanese interfered with a Chinese vessel. China closed the tap for rare earths. And Japan rushed to the World Trade Organization and said, illegal interference in free trade. WTO ruled in favor of Japan. China was forced to allow the trade to continue. China learned, we need to do this another way. And they learned, export control regime. So we see that China has decided to aim very specifically at our defense needs. This is important because rare earths, even in our very sharply divided political arena today, remains an area of bipartisan support. The Democrats support the urgency of our obtaining and securing rare earth sources because it feeds the green economy. The Republicans support it because it is essential to the defense of our country. That bipartisan support is making a huge difference. In one of those areas, President Trump took the lead with a succession of executive orders, all of which took effect last year, and he began in January, this time last year, to do two things. Streamline the permitting process in America. Because very famously, we don't have a professional mining industry in this country because it takes up to 25 years to break ground on a new mine. And a large part of that is the permitting process. So President Trump issued an executive order essentially cutting that back to 2 years. Another problem for the Western world in the geopolitical framework is the major mining companies like Rio Tinto, like BHP, like Freeport-McMoRan are not rushing into the critical minerals space as far as rare earths goes. Copper, by the way, has recently been named a critical material in the United States. So the space geographically and politically and economically in the West is characterized by so-called junior miners. What that means is an exploration company that is trying to make itself into a mining company. I'm on the board of one of those. It's called American Rare Earths. It's an Australian, primarily owned company, but you can buy the stock on the OTCQB. And we hope to be on the NASDAQ this year. So American Rare Earths has 3 deposits in this country, one of which is right here in Arizona, out in La Paz. And we called that Project La Paz. It has rare earths and it has scandium. It's not an easy project to develop, though, because the rock is very fragmented. It'd be very expensive. We have a project that we're holding in Nevada. That will be very expensive to develop because, unlike our La Paz deposit, and unlike the one in Wyoming that I'm about to speak of, the one in Nevada has a lot of uranium and thorium associated with it. This is the major problem with rare earths. Geologically, they tend to be coupled with uranium and thorium. Makes sense. Who's their neighbors on the periodic chart? That adds to the complexity and the cost of producing rare earth materials. China hasn't worried about that, right? As we all know, there have been instances as recently as 2 years ago where the air pollution in Beijing was so bad, people were dying, they were choking to death. Birds were choking to death. China does not share our concern for either the welfare of people or the welfare of the planet when it comes to what it perceives to be its national security priorities. And China understands rare earths are their national security priority. Now, American Rare Earths has a deposit in Wyoming. Don't let anybody kid you. I've heard this said, oh, well, rare earths aren't all that rare. You know what? No rock is rare. What is rare is finding a deposit that you can develop economically, make money from, and bring to market. That's rare. We've got that in Wyoming. 2.6 billion, with a B, tons of total rare earth oxides. What that means is, as we process that, we wind up with somewhere around 400 million tons of concentrate that can be transformed to metals and batteries. What does that mean for us in this room? It means a minimum 100 years of secure rare earth supply. So we've obtained it and we have secured it. We have secured it in La Paz. In La Paz, we have 1.5 billion tons of rare earths. One company alone here in America can take care of our national security if we choose to allow that to happen. So coming back to this dynamic with China, I've just said we've got rare earths here in America. We can be secure. What's the problem then? The problem is that even with relief on the permitting side, another obstacle remains, and that's called money, money, money. It is expensive to build any mine. It is extra expensive to build a rare earth mine. To build the first phase of the mega mine in Wyoming is $500 to $600 million. Now keep in mind, we're a junior miner. That's like me going over to Shoshone and saying, hey, Shoshone, you know me, I'm a good person. Lend me $50 million, would you? Really? What are you going to secure it with? Oh, I got some rocks in my garage. Yeah, you're going to run to write me that check, aren't you? That's a big obstacle. So, again, the US government is responding. Department of Defense has an authorized fund from Congress of several $billion dollars. Department of Energy, likewise. There are other government agencies that also have money available, including the Export-Import Bank, to support the growth of mines in America. The problem is, to get at the money, you have to be able to prove that what you have can be turned into metal and consequently magnets. So that's the process that we and every other junior mining company in the Western world is currently working on. Because here's the catch. Every rare earth deposit has a unique fingerprint. Unlike copper, where you can say, oh, okay, we know copper. We can send that through the SX process. We separate, we bind, we turn out cathodes. Copper is copper is copper. Rare earth is not that. Every mine needs its own chemistry set. Fortunately, at American Rare Earths, we've just finished cracking ours. We now have our chemistry set. We're going to move full speed ahead. I'll be going to tell the government that and see if they'll hand us some of that money, money, money. But the problem is still time. It physically takes time to build a mine. We can't get that mine built in less than 4 years. And I just said, we have a moratorium with China that could expire at any moment, but that legally will expire in 8 months. It's a long gap between 8 months and 4 years. So we're looking around the world. We're looking to see where can we find good quality rare earths that we can secure, where the country will enable us to build a mine quickly. Now, I can tell you from my experience with Freeport-McMoRan, miraculously, we built what is still one of the world's largest copper cobalt mines in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So not an easy place. We built it in 3 years. And that was without government support. Freeport did it on its own. That was without any insurance guarantees. Freeport had to auto-finance it. Not many companies in the entire world can do that. That's where the role of the US government becomes so essential. Not just opening the doors with the Congolese government and the recent peace agreement in Eastern Congo that you might have read about was designed to function as the thin point of the spear in opening a door for US companies to build mines in the Congo. And Congo is a rich place to go if you're in the rock business. Not only do they have a lot of rare earth, they have high-grade rare earth. Our rare earth here in America, here in the West, universally, we've got a lot of it, it's low grade. It's a lot less valuable. It's necessary, but less valuable. You have to do more to it, so it takes longer to get it to market. Congo is a great place to be. China is all over Congo. China has been all over Congo for going on 20 years. Congo bought the Freeport mine. China bought the Freeport mine in Congo. So again, we're running behind China in a key country. Now, we have the advantage that the Congolese would prefer to work with us. They don't like the Chinese. Very few countries are running around with their hand in the air saying, yes, please, China, come and exploit us. Because the experience of the last 20 years has shown that China is pursuing a policy of neocolonialism. They say, look, don't worry about anything. We'll build an airport for you. We'll build some roads for you. How about we build a dam so you have better power? And we'll do all of that for free. You just give us that pile of rocks over there and the freedom to develop that pile of rocks into a mine, Don't interfere with us. Don't ask us questions. Don't charge us taxes. Don't make us pay export duties. And we'll do all of this for you for free. Over the course of 20 years, lots of countries have figured out that there is no such thing as a free dinner. Some of them are trying to kick the Chinese out. We have opportunities. Whether we will be able to exploit them is another matter. American companies, over the course of that same last quarter century, have changed profoundly in both philosophy and operations. The philosophy has become, we must deliver increased profit every quarter, no matter what. That's a bad philosophy. That philosophy has nothing to do with building economies or national security. But that philosophy, in turn, has led to American companies saying, oh my God, I can't go to a place like the Congo. That's really hard. That's really dangerous. They might not be nice to me there. How will my shareholders get increased profit every quarter? Our private sector needs to shape the heck up if we're going to actually even get into the fight with China. Because our private sector, until now, has legitimately said, we can't compete against China. Their companies get government subsidies. Their companies get financial protection. So let's keep on with the Congo as an example. Congolese tax official shows up at the door of a Chinese mining company and says, you owe us $50 million in back taxes. Now, an American company will instantly go to the archives, pull out the paperwork, and say, no, I don't, because here's where I paid, right here. And we'll start a long legal discussion with the government. The Chinese company will say, oh, just a moment, please. And they'll go over to the safe, and they'll fill a couple of briefcases, and they'll hand over $50 million. And they'll say, problem solved, right? And the Congolese guy will go, absolutely, you may resume operations. American companies are right to say the playing field is not level. But in our new environment of criticality, the US government is stepping forward. So with financial support from the US government, with better political interference from the US government on behalf of US businesses, we can level the playing field, taking advantage of the reality that a lot of these companies would like to be free of China themselves. So that's good news. Let's talk about Greenland. Greenland, and let me be really clear, does not have rare earth. I am the co-chairman of the Critical Minerals Institute. It's based out of Toronto. It's an independent body. Brings together the leading experts in the entire world. Australians have said there's nothing there. Americans have said there's nothing there. Canadians have said there's nothing there. Various Europeans have said there's nothing there. What Greenland has, they have gold, they have diamonds, and they have a strategic geographic position. There's folks in this room, particularly you gentlemen who may have served in World War II, you'll remember the Dewey Line. And Greenland was one of those stations, a forward listening post that would alert the United States if Russia launched missiles or certain kinds of attack aircraft. Greenland's position is a national security asset, but not because of rare earths. And you can probably tell it kind of irks me that a lot of the press is making this sound as if, oh, we have to have Greenland for the rare earths. Don't believe it for a second. That's genuine fake news. But there are other compelling reasons why the administration might want to negotiate with Greenland to get Greenland into our sphere of influence. But it won't be for rare earth. If we want rare earth, the next best country in the entire world to go and visit is Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, has a lot of rare earth, and it has high-grade rare earth. And like the DRC, it would love to have a closer relationship with the United States, and it would love to have American companies doing business in Kazakhstan. Unlike the DRC, there actually are American companies currently working in Kazakhstan. DRC. So why aren't we all rushing over to Kazakhstan? Because Kazakhstan's neighbors are Russia and China. That doesn't exactly make it our sphere of influence. And the current geostrategic reality is countries are returning to a philosophy of spheres of influence and aggressing against these spheres of influence risks leading to confrontation. I can tell you for a fact Russia has been exploiting illegally rare earths out of Kazakhstan. I can tell you for a fact that China legally has been exploiting rare earths out of Kazakhstan. Therefore, neither one of those countries is going to want an influx of US companies. Only the best, the boldest, and the bravest should head to Kazakhstan, but by golly, we need to head there. Because once we're there, we stand a better chance of securing what we have acquired. In the DRC, we don't need to send in the Marines to secure what we have acquired. Kazakhstan, that's another dynamic. It's not unheard of to have to ask for military protection for a mine. That's happened in a couple of African countries. Happened recently in Mali. Is there a way that we can get into Kazakhstan without triggering aggression from Russia and China? Yeah. Now let's talk about Saudi Arabia. I actually am leaving Saturday to go to Saudi Arabia. I will be speaking at what has become the world's largest mining conference. In only 4 years, the kingdom has set up the world's largest mining conference. It has surpassed Canada, whose Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada, PDAC, meeting for going on 50 years was the world's largest industry gathering. Saudi Arabia is where you got to be. Why is that? Back in the Stone Ages of 2010, when the United States wasn't really thinking about rare earths, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia was thinking about not just rare earths. He was thinking about Saudi Arabia needs to be a major global power economically, militarily. How do I, the Crown Prince that I am, realize my vision? How do I elevate my country, which remains, particularly in a societal sense, 2010, very much a closed enclave? And closed enclaves don't do well as world powers. What do I need to do? He paid up for some of the world's very best brains to come to Riyadh. They worked for 3 years, and what they produced is called Saudi Development Plan 2030. 2030 plan went into effect during COVID in 2020. In the last 5 years, Saudi Arabia suddenly has a major mining company. It's called Ma'aden. It's headed by an experienced American CEO. It has experienced executives from all around the world in key positions. The prince said to Saudi Aramco, "We got to get out of this oil business. It's a dying duck." I guess Mr. Trump may have missed that memo, but the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia says oil is a dying duck. Aramco, you have to go be a mining company now. So Aramco has set up a huge division specifically around critical minerals. And they are searching the world, as is Ma'aden, and they are snapping up the opportunities, including in Kazakhstan, where they have bought the largest native mining company, giving themselves unparalleled position and access into the Kazakh market and the society and the good and the powerful. And by the way, there's a couple of royal families in Kazakhstan, and they are related to the Saudi royal family. There's no coincidences here. There's geopolitics at play. So Saudi has also decided it's going to build electric vehicles, and it is going to produce metal and magnets. It is, as I speak, finishing its second processing facility for rare earths. They've built 2 in 3 years. We are in the process of building 4, one of which might be available this year. Saudi's got 2 on the line already. So they also remarkably have transformed their society. I was astounded. I was at a conference, a Financial Times conference in London 18 months ago. And I was speaking to a man from the Saudi Arabian Investment Fund, which has a measly $1 trillion to manage. And he said, "Madame, do you know why there are so many cranes in Riyadh?" And I said, "Yeah, I expect it's because you're attracting all these new businesses and they need office space." And he said, "Yeah, that's part of it." He said, "But more importantly, in 2020, we only had 3% of women in our professional workforce. Today, as I stand here speaking with you, Madame, it is over 30%. We need to retrofit our high-rises because we never needed women's bathrooms before." Talk about a societal change. And the prince is just ruthlessly stuffing it down everyone's throats, and it's working. Which country hosted the Ukrainian peace talks? Saudi. Which country remains engaged in trying to persuade Russia to stand down? Saudi. Which country facilitated the peace talks in the Congo between the US and Rwanda? Saudi. The prince's vision is coming true. Saudi Arabia is becoming a global political power. Where did President Trump make his first foreign visit? Riyadh. That is understood in a diplomatic world to mean that Saudi Arabia is this administration's #1 priority. So no surprise, maybe a shock, but no surprise, that the Crown Prince is invited to Washington, rejuvenating his personal presence and image on the global stage as the leader of a politically vital partner nation. So, among other things, Saudi commits to $800 billion of investment in developing the US industrial base. And oh, by the way, we commit to sell Saudi F-35s. Remember my comment about you need to be able to project force to be a major political player in the global scene. Saudi waits 5 years, then it annihilates Israel. It annihilates Iran and anybody else that it doesn't like. Force projection. Now, pure speculation, but if I'm the prince and I'm going to invest $800 billion in American infrastructure, I'm going to want to acquire some rocks because Saudi Arabia doesn't have rare earth in any great quantity. They've already got 2 processing plants waiting. They need to feed those things with some rocks. Remember I mentioned we have 2 projects. A new discovery has just been made in Utah, 4,000 acres, stuffed full of rare earth. Saudi Arabia has potential pickings, either for outright acquisition or for joint venture partnerships. So here's a scenario, hypothetical scenario. Saudi says they're going to invest $250 million, maybe even $500 million, in 1 or 2 early stage projects in the rare earth space. And in exchange, there will be an offtake agreement. Offtake agreement is just a deal through which the mining company getting the money will repay that money to the lender by giving them a certain percentage of the production of the mine. So in this hypothetical scenario, we get an offtake agreement. Maybe it's 50-50 Saudi-US. Maybe it's 60-40 Saudi-US. After all, it's their money. Maybe it's 70-30 Saudi-US. In any event, I could see a hypothetical scenario in which Saudi develops mines in our country, but not the rest of the chain. The national security lies in making metal and magnets. Because we don't put concentrate into cell phones. We don't put concentrate into EVs. We put metal and magnets. Washington's smart. And what they'll say to Saudi is, you know what? Sure, you can invest a couple of $100 billion in a mine or something, but we actually want to build some refineries for metal, and we want to actually build some magnet makers. Saudi is madly building those as we speak in the kingdom. Last but not least, coming back to the future, and artificial intelligence. And that scenario that I led with, one of the points of political friction between the US and China right now is in that AI space. Who is going, if possible, to develop a global platform? Why does that matter? Those who control the information flow control the information. Those who control the flow of goods through the AI structures control the economy. This is the war of the future. And now Saudi Arabia is in the game. Some of the best minds in the world in this arena who are working on things like neural network quantum computing are moving to Riyadh. They're being offered salaries like $3 million. We'll build you a palace, whatever you want. Unfortunately, at the same time, we're at war with our universities. That's not the right time to be at war with our universities. And speaking of universities and the time problem of building mines, we don't have knowledge people running around. In the entire Western world, it's only Australia that has been producing rare earths through their champion company, Linus. They have knowledge. They need all their knowledge. They're keeping all of their knowledge because, hey, they're right next door to China. They're on the front line. They have to keep what they've got and defend it, securing the assets, right? In this case, the knowledge assets. 6 months ago, China very quietly lifted the passports of Chinese employees of rare earth companies and also chemical scientists. Why? Because they know, they're watching what Saudi's doing. If those Chinese leave China, they ain't coming back. They're either going to take that knowledge to Saudi or the US or somebody, but they ain't coming back. Secure the asset. Secure the knowledge. The irony for us of the last 25 years is a lot of those Chinese were probably educated here in the United States. And we chased them out. And we're still chasing them out. We need to secure the assets, including knowledge, if we're going to win in this struggle. Now, coming back to any minute now, China could just turn off the tap, but in 7 to 8 months, unless there's some kind of dramatic shift, they still might turn off the tap. What are we doing about that? What we are doing about that, we have a cooperative agreement with Australia. That Linus company that I mentioned is one of the ones that's building a processing facility in America, building it down in Texas. Linus is in the process of opening a new mine in Australia. They have agreed that they will process that material in Australia, but they will send it then to the United States, 50-50 joint venture. So we are working internationally in the Western context to try and close that gap, to rapidly build at least the skeleton of the supply chain, and to secure at least a skeleton of the necessary material to keep us alive. In the United States, the Department of Defense is also preparing to build processing facilities for rare earths on selected military bases. That matters because, as we know, what goes on inside that fence, that's U.S. government business. They're not worried about the National Environmental Protection Act. They're not worried about the Clean Air Act. They bypass all of that. So the military, assuming it can find the knowledge, can build the different processing facilities needed by companies like American Rare Earths or this new company in Utah, Ionic Materials. And we can turn it over to the military, and therefore, the military is one step closer to ensuring our national security. Still needs somebody to make the metal, still needs somebody to make the magnets, but steps are being taken. So I see that per instruction, I should stop talking at this moment in order to take questions. So I hope you've enjoyed the lecture so far. Let's have some questions. Thank you.
Super lecture so far.
Thank you.
Super interesting. So it's open to questions. Raise your hand. We have 2 microphones going around. Bobby, you.
Question. I am to understand that Texas processing plant has been stopped, and I have seen no information on it at all. Now, maybe you have something. And is there any other areas in the world that are building process plants?
In the United States in particular, yes. The local government near Round Top temporarily halted that. The national government has issued a restart directive. So at this point, it's a battle between Washington and the local authorities in Texas, and I expect Governor Abbott is going to weigh in aggressively on that one. So I think Linus will be back in construction pretty soon. Now, there's also a company called Ucore that is doing a very unique processing technology, they say they are anyway, and have a facility almost complete in Louisiana and a second one in New Brunswick, Canada. Their process fascinates me because remember I said that every deposit has unique chemical fingerprint and therefore requires specialized processing. The CEO of Ucore, a friend of mine, Pat Ryan, little bandy Irish guy, he's quite something. He says that they have cracked the chemistry for everything in such a way that he can basically flip the switch, and this week he's going to process so-called monazite sand, rare earth, but next week he can flip that switch and process hard rock, rare earth, which is what we've got out here in the West. So very interesting, not up and running yet, but close. He says they're close. They have Department of Defense backing, $600 million for Louisiana, $300 million for Canada. A plant is in early stage construction in Oklahoma that is focusing specifically on hard rock chemistry, not expected to come to market faster than about 3 years. Canada has the Saskatchewan Research Council in the province of Saskatchewan that has an operational processing facility and is looking actively for feedstock to test run it because it's brand new, but it is built and it is functional. Company called Energy Fuels in Utah, historic uranium company, realized that rare earths come accompanied with a lot of uranium and thorium, decided to get into the rare earth business, and they say they now have ready to operate a rare earth processing circuit. They haven't yet run it, but they say it's ready. So there's those. As far as the rest of the world goes, Lynas has a facility in Australia that is functional. They're building a second one. They have one in Malaysia that was temporarily shut down by the Malaysian government, but they had second thoughts about that after the whole world jumped on them. South Korea wants to build one, and they have the resources to do so, so they probably will. That one's hard. Again, it comes back to what can you secure, right? That's awfully close to China. And anything coming out of that particular plant is easily intercepted by China. But in any event, yeah, everybody's scrambling. There's some talk in Germany about building a processing facility because right now the European Union area doesn't have any such thing. So yeah, there's a scramble for that.
Doesn't Ukraine have rare earth minerals? Ukraine.
We're not sure.
Could you repeat the question?
Doesn't Ukraine have rare earth minerals? We're not sure. And the reason I say we're not sure, the only extant information is from the old Soviet Union studies back in the 1950s, when nobody really was looking extensively at rare earths. Now, the Soviets probably were, for defense purposes, looking, but it's old data, it's not relevant to the present, and we don't know how reliable it is either, because it was old Soviet Union data. If Ukraine has those rare earths, they're in a contested area. They're in the Donbass. And I don't see a lot of American companies wanting to run to a war zone to try to develop those. And unfortunately, Russia has done a good effort at destroying Ukraine's supporting infrastructure, the roads, the railroads, the bridges, the electric plants. So all of that would also need to be restored in order to operate effectively in Ukraine. All of which is to say Ukraine would be a very long-term prospect. And again, coming back, very hard to secure. We might acquire. I don't know if we can secure.
Now, something practical. We
Right.
have all these processing plants. How do you get the rocks from wherever they are to these various processing plants?
Absolutely. That's why I'm fond. How do you get the rocks from their various mine situations to where the processing facilities are located? Well, it's why I usually say that there is no shorter or more secure supply chain than mined and made in America. So in our case, the processing facilities that I mentioned in country are vital. We still have infrastructure, thank goodness. Saskatchewan would be in play for us as well as a processing site. China, for that 25 years, was literally shipping container boatloads full of rocks to China to process. So, it certainly can be done. It has been done. But again, that's a very long chain and very vulnerable. So that's why I'm a little leery of sort of the South Korean effort, because you could source rocks for a South Korean processing facility from Estonia, Kazakhstan, Those are the closest places right now. But then you'd still be trying to get that product back to the US through the South China Sea area. That's a hard road to hoe.
As one who worried about an analogous problem, the semiconductor industry, over the last 50 years, there are some direct parallels which raise warning flags for the rare earth issue. The United States was the hegemon in the semiconductor business back in the 1960s, 70s, even 80s. And we lost it all because we said, well, everything is free trade and government has no business being in this. And we allowed the semiconductor technology and the semiconductor machinery to become a worldwide commodity. What's happened is countries like Japan, Taiwan, and China are now the dominant players in the semiconductor industry. The government and major corporations each tried to set up their own sources of semiconductors, starting with Ford Motor Company, IBM, AT&T. They all got out of the business, and many more, all got out of the business because it became too expensive for their business models. And as a result, now we're having to entice companies like TSMC back into the United States at the cost of billions of dollars, but still controlled by the Taiwanese. The prospect of building refineries, first of all, on private capital, and you've indicated substantial government involvement, means that is reassuring. But building special purpose projects on military bases to support the military need will run afoul of exactly the same problem that happened in the semiconductor business when the Defense Department, the Energy Department, the intelligence community, all of which started their own little semiconductor operations to support their supply, ended up deciding, well, we can't afford this, and closed them. And as a result, we now have no American-controlled strategic source of chips. Now, of chips for defense purposes specifically. Now, the problem is, how do we prevent that from happening in the rare earth? Because in the longer prospect, we're going to discover that special purpose processing plants for special customers are not a long-term viable solution to the problem.
Do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, actually I do. And it's a very good analogy. So because also that semiconductor element is a vital part of quantum computing, AI platforms, et cetera, and rare earths are embedded in the semiconductors. It's interesting that you mentioned TSMC because, again, from a pure geopolitical perspective, I would say that the reason that they came to the US, irrespective of choosing Arizona, which is good for us, was to ensure that the US would defend them in the event of a Chinese aggression. So they had their own ulterior motives. Yeah, or to prevent China from taking over, yeah. So the Trump administration is doing something very interesting that is, in a certain narrow perspective, very un-American. And that is that the government is taking equity positions in companies that it deems to be of national security interest. So that mining company in California that I mentioned, MP Materials, was running at a loss. They were about $500 million in the red. And so in a recent agreement between MP Materials and the United States government, the Department of Defense essentially ponied up $500 million and washed out that debt, but also importantly, via an additional 10% cash contribution, chased out the remaining Chinese investors to fully Americanize MP Materials. The government has made a similar investment in Intel to try to bring Intel back into play as major technology element, securely American, securely here in the heartland of Arizona. So they are looking actively, by they, I mean the spectrum of US agencies, DoD, DOE, they are looking actively at the possibility of doing something similar. So not just making a loan, but attaching an equity element to that. And of course, why do I say that in a certain definition it's anti-American? I mean, we've always had that separation of state and private sector. But the administration, as you recall, issued essentially a declaration of economic war. The war provisions allow the government to directly invest in private sector companies. Nobody really understood that when it happened because nobody was thinking along these lines. But some smart person in the administration was. So the potential exists for more of that. And frankly, I don't think DoD is going to keep those processing facilities running very long. They don't need 7. You know, I mean, the defense need, while crucial when you look at the spectrum of rare earth usage, defense use is crucial, but it is a tiny little sliver of the market. My concern is DoD blocks the private sector development by funneling everything into the processing facilities at the military centers. Because they also, the military, they have a direct mandate from Congress to do 2 things. First, make sure by 2030, so a measly 4 years from now, that nothing that their suppliers source or that they themselves directly purchase has any element in it that came from China. That's huge. I mean, if I were the CEO of Raytheon, they would have found me dead in my chair the day that that announcement came out. So they also have a mandate from Congress that says you must build a national stockpile of rare earth materials. Well, it's senseless to say I'm going to fill a warehouse full of rocks because the rocks are not what anybody needs. At the very least, you have to have concentrate. So if they're going to meet that element of the congressional mandate, they need to be able to process their own rocks. So they have a couple of short-term matters that are pushing them in that direction, but I don't think they're going to be in the business, for 20, 30 years.
We have a question. Bob?
It seems like we hear of sources of the rare earths being found all over the world at random. How much do we understand of the geology of where the rare earths tend to collect and where especially might the high-grade ores be?
Yeah, the question is, you hear a lot about rare earths being found here and there in the world, but how much do we understand about really where to look? What do we understand about where the rare earths are likely to be, or are we just stumbling across them? We actually know quite a bit. There are 3 types of rare earth. One is called ionic clay, and that is what has just been found in Utah. 4,000 acres of ionic clay rare earth. And they were looking specifically for that because of the rock formations that were visible in that area that were suggestive of the possibility of a monazite clay deposit. Monazite clay is basically the second best kind of rare earth raw material you can have. Clay obviously is kind of clingy, but clay tends to be higher grade and lower penalty elements, meaning less uranium, less thorium. So it can be processed with a known technology and at fairly good economic recovery rates because you don't have to worry about the penalty elements. Ionic clay tends to be in the Caribbean basin, and right now in Brazil, they are running like mad building ionic clay rare earth mines. So in a geological sense, we know where they are. China mostly has sand. Sand is great from the sense of, clearly, it's not clingy and it's not hard. You can separate out very easily. The sand is bad because it is the highest concentration of penalty elements. Interestingly, China is working on a technology to build thorium reactors. They're going to find a use for all of that stuff that they're dumping off to the side right now. So, and in our country, Energy Fuels particularly is looking to utilize the uranium byproducts for a lot of the so-called mini nukes, one of which is now operating in test phase in Kemmerer, Wyoming. Those things are really interesting. It's the size of a boxcar, so in power terms, it's very portable, and you can add on circuits very easily. So you can go from powering the teeny little village of Kemmerer, and it's teeny, I've been there, to powering Denver by just coupling on the required number of additional boxcars. So that's really interesting technology, and we're using it for that. And then there's hard rock, which is mostly what's found in the western United States, mostly what's found in Canada. It's part of the way that the volcanic activity took place in the North American plate. So we know that that's there. We know Russia has hard rock, same volcanic plate. So yes, geologically we do know a lot. USGS is a fabulous resource. And just over the last year, the government has given USGS enough money that they are able to utilize the latest technological tools for mapping. And they are working on a map of the world to give US companies that forward-looking advantage.
Question there.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I inferred from your excellent talk is that if you want to do anything pretty much in a global economy today, like rare earth and semiconductors and other things, your government should be a dictator or a dictator-like government rather than a democratic government. Dictators don't have elections frequently. Democratic governments have elections every 2 to 4 years. They change parties, things change. And I just wonder if, excluding all the humanitarian benefits of a democratic country over a dictatorial country and leadership, is that why China and Saudi Arabia and other dictator-like countries can do things so quickly and don't have to worry about a Congress and about money and about changes of government?
Yes. I'm not going to try to correct you because you're not wrong. The answer is yes, pure and simple. It's also why, you could have added Russia to that list. It is an unfortunate reality that, aside from ourselves, let's look at the European Union for a minute. There's a really sharp divide inside of the European Parliament at the moment as to how aggressively the EU should be building parts of the supply chain and which parts should they build. Now, in all fairness, Europe being an older part of Western civilization, a good percentage of the mining, primary mining, has been tapped out. But one of the debates in the European Union is about, well, should we not become the suppliers to the world of materials from secondary recovery? What that means is recycled. So, all these big copper mines, just to take one example, or coal mines that have been operating for 100 years or more, we've all seen these huge piles of discarded rock, the tailings. Well, those companies were mining specifically for coal or copper. They weren't mining to see, oh, do we also have rare earths? Do we also have lithium? Do we also have nickel? So all of that was tossed in the garbage heap over there. There's a race around the world to develop technologies that are capable of doing this secondary recovery at scale. Because, of course, the problem is if you have little tiny amounts of it, it's meaningless. Because all around the world, we're looking for billions of tons to support economic activity, et cetera. But that's got a lot of favor in the EU because it's less environmentally nasty, right? You're actually cleaning up dump sites and fueling economic growth and respecting the environment, democratic principles. So it sounds like something that they should all agree on and be rushing ahead with, but they're not. Because the debate is, if we invest in this, there's only so much money. If we invest in this, we won't be able to build magnet plants. And don't we really want to build magnets because isn't the whole world hostage to magnets? And besides which, those are very clean and nice. That's technology. That's a little box that we're building magnets inside of. Isn't that where we should be at? So there's analysis paralysis going on, to use an old State Department term, going on in the EU that's affecting their ability to contribute to this race in time against China. But yeah, I mean, history has always shown dictators get things done. What was the famous saying about Mussolini? At least he made the trains run on time. I mean, it is an unfortunate reality that countries whose leaders are willing to brush aside concerns about the well-being of the broader citizenry or of the environment or the consequences of the long term, those governments are going to bring their products to market faster, and they're going to get a bigger market share. It's always been that way.
So I'll make a comment. Firstly, it's wonderful talk. And great that you emphasize the geology, especially.
Not that he has a horse in that race.
You mentioned early on the importance of energy and water. This summer, when we were in Iceland, one of the things that puzzled me a lot was this gigantic building. I didn't know why in the world it was there, and the reason it was is because they shipped aluminum ore to Iceland. They have cheap water, they have cheap energy, they could process it. It's a fairly safe place. Is there any consideration of using Iceland for processing?
No.
No.
The reason being that Iceland itself is a safe place, but it's also an Arctic country. There are very specific provisions under the International Agreement on the Arctic as to what member states can and cannot permit in terms of activities. Mining is on that list, and associated mining activities are on that list. So it would require a large debate within the member countries to the Arctic Treaty, which, by the way, includes Russia, who violates it all the time, in order to bring Iceland and certain other countries into that production cycle. But I do want to touch on energy for a minute, because what makes Iceland so interesting is what they've done with thermal energy. Thermal energy, we could develop that out here in the west of the United States as well. We still have, as we all know from Yellowstone National Park, and from, in an indirect way, California, we still have significant volcanic activity. We could, with, at least in theory that I've read, one thermal plant power America. And thermal is not new. I mean, thermal technologies have been around in different countries and different formats for going on 30 years. I tried to convince Freeport to power our mine in the Congo from thermal, because Congo has a huge thermal potential. They've got the Rift Valley, the volcano that runs down through the Rift Valley. And it raises the question of, at what point will governments and societies really push to turn to that? Because if you want to talk about clean energy, thermal's clean energy. The downside risk, of course, is we still don't know a lot about how volcanoes work anyway. So if we decide that we sort of want to ram a big old pole down into the middle of a volcanic channel and suck that energy off of that flow, are we going to cause the supervolcano in Yellowstone to erupt and annihilate us all in a flash? Maybe. Maybe. And that's the gray zone that's holding thermal back. Because so far, there haven't been enough practical applications, even in Iceland, to demonstrate that it is secure long term. And I don't know about you, but I'm not in favor of being annihilated in a flash.
Well, on that thought, thank you so much for a truly interesting talk.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.